have with us our esteemed Vice Chancellor, Sir Professor Dr. Muhammad Ashraful Alam, the head of the department, Mr. Pranab Kanti Deb, and of course, our distinguished faculty members, and yes, of course, our honorable guest, Professor Dr. Ahmar Mahbub, whose presence and insights will surely enrich this session. Thank you all for joining us and making this event impactful. Before we proceed, I would like to extend my heartfelt shout out to Ma'am Caroline Livovsky. Pardon me, ma'am, if I pronounced your name incorrect. Okay, thank you. Now it's my pleasure to invite our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Sir Professor Dr. Muhammad Ashraful Alam, to say a few words for this event. Sir, this virtual stage is yours. Thank you. Sir, you are muted, sir. Your device is on mute.
Good morning, everybody. It's my distinct pleasure to welcome you all in this insightful session of our Mentor Talk webinar organized by the Department of English, Sylhet International University. Today, we gather in a virtual space to foster and exchange idea and inspire growth in our academic and professional pursuits. I want to commend the Department of English for organizing this event, which reflects the department's commitment to nurture the intellectual curiosity and bring the gap between the academic learnings and the real-world insights. In this time, such forums provides essential support, guidance, and inspiration to our students and faculty alike. We are here honored to welcome Professor Ahmar Mahbub from Sydney University, Australia, whose experience and knowledge in this field promotes to make the student session a truly enriched one. I know Professor Mahbub has not only a wealth of expert, but also a passion for the education and mentorship that is bound to resonate with all of us here. As we embark on this discussion, I encourage each of you to take the full advantage of this opportunity, engage activity, ask questions, and let there be a space for the idea flourish and connections are made. Remember, it is the strength such a lecture that we grow both academically and professionally. Thank you for being here, and let us look forward to an inspiring and provide proactive sessions. Thank you and enjoy this session. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you so much, sir, for your inspiring words. Now, it's my pleasure to invite Nabila Mahmoumi, an esteemed alumna of the English department at Sylhet International University, to recite Frog River, which is written by our distinguished guest, Professor Ahmar Mahbub, for us. So, Ms. Nabila, the virtual stage is yours.
Thank you. Now I'm going to recite a poem which is written by Ahmar Mahbub. Its name is Frog River. Frog River. Beside Frog River, swift and wide, two frogs, Jack and Mark, reside. Jack was bold, full of pride. Mark was cautious, never lied. One bright morning in the sun's warm glow, a red kangaroo came hopping slow. Is it safe to cross? He asked with cheer. Jack said yes, dive right in, have no fear. But Mark shook his head, his voice full of dread. The current is strong, you will be measly. Ignoring the warning, the kangaroo leaped, but the Frog River's strength sealed his fate. Later that noon, a pygmy possum drew near. Is it safe to cross the river I fear? Mark said, it's too risky. Please stay away. But Jack urged her on. You will be okay. With hope in her heart, she took a brave leap. But the second leap led to waters so deep. The river's forceful current swept her away. The brothers regretted their choice that day. Then a platypus from the river did rise. What's causing these tragedies? Open your eyes. Mark confessed. We argue, we fight. On whose feet to cross, and who's just right. Enough, cried the platypus. End this feud. We are brothers. Your bond should be strong. Work together with wisdom, with foresight, or more will be lost to the river's might. As evening fell, a wombat strolled by. Is it safe to cross? I'm eager to try. Jack and Mark knew they had to be wise, so they joined their strength to avoid demise. Jack led the way with Mark by his side, guiding the wombat through the rising tide. Together they swam steady and true, and safely the wombat made it through. From that day forth, the brothers learned that unity is power that can't be spurned. For with teamwork and love in all that you do, there is no river too wide, no challenge too new. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you. Very good.
Okay. Thank you, Nabila ma'am, for your beautiful, beautiful recitation. Now, this is the moment we all have been waiting for, when I have the honor of inviting our esteemed guest, Professor Dr. Ahmar Mahbub, to enlighten us with his knowledge. But before we hear from him, allow me to share a brief introduction to highlight his remarkable achievements. So, Professor Dr. Ahmar Mahbub, an associate professor at the Department of Linguistics at the University of Sydney. He has earned his PhD at Indiana University, Bloomington in 2003. He is keenly interested in the application of language sciences to developmental issues. His primary research interest is on an examination of policies, practices, and implications of language variation in local and global contexts. In pursuing this goal, Ahmar draws from and contributes to a range of linguistics and applied linguistics traditions, theories, and methodologies. In 2019, Dr. Mahbub was named as Australia's Research Field Leader, English Language and Literature in the Australian Research Magazine. He has worked in the fields of language policy development, Fijian and Creole languages, NNEST studies, English language acquisition, English language teaching and teacher education, World Englishes, Pragmatics, and Minority Languages in South Asia. He was the co-editor of EESOL Quarterly, TESOL Quarterly, alongside Brian Paltridge for several years. He was also the associate editor of Linguistics and the Human Sciences and serves on the editorial boards of a number of journals. Ahmar is also the founder of the Free Linguistics Conference and FLC accreditation. He has served and serves on the editorial board of numerous journals. So with that said, let's welcome Professor Dr. Ahmar Mahbub, who will now share his insight with us. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, VC, Alam Sahab. Thank you, Pranab. Thank you, all of you, for being here, for making this event happen. I believe this is my second time visiting your campus virtually. Hopefully next time, the third time will be in person, but that's in the future. So again, so let's move on. I've got a lot of stuff to share. So I will be pacing through it a bit, but hopefully it will all connect together and we will have time to raise any things that I might have jumped over and you might want me to talk about in more detail, because I do realize I have only 1 hour or less. Okay, so the topic of the talk today is the Frog River in the making, and it's in the making, literally in the making. Some of the stuff that I will be sharing with you was done earlier this morning. Some of it is being done at the moment. Some of that was done late in the night last night. So it's literally is in the making. And it's a credible project. So I'll be sharing its origin. So I'll be sharing the background of this project. Then I will share, and I mean, we already had a reading of the Frog River, but I'll read it again with some images and things. Then I'll talk a bit about what credible projects are and how we construct them. Then I'll talk about language, art, and music in relation to each other in the development and the construction of the project. And then I will talk about how my students are currently working on developing workbooks on learning learning Cantonese, English, and Putonghua using the Frog River. So turning this poem, a narrative poem, into educational resources. The timeline of this whole project from conceptualization to today's presentation, it took less than 3 months. So the very first time I had the idea of developing a poem on the Frog River is only a few months ago, which is when I went up to Kuya Beach up in far north Queensland, this near Mossman area north of Cairns, for the people who know Australia. I also have included a little map there. So this is Uncle Bennett and me having a conversation around one of the books that he was involved in. And during the time that I had with him, we went through and looked through quite a bit of work on language and linguistics. And he shared a Gugu Yalanji dictionary that he had been involved in developing. He shared a bilingual picture book, which is what you can see actually. So in the picture that you see on this screen, that's me looking through the book. And Uncle Bennett was very nice. He gave me a copy when I left. So I have a copy here as well. And we also talked about ideas of potentially a new book. So this is when the first idea came, and this was nowhere close to what the final result has been. So this would be in, I would say, the last week of July, first week of August, and now is November. So August, September, October, and now, so about 3 months from the conception of the idea to what I will be sharing with you. Of course, this is the making of the project, so we're still working on it. My students are working on their draft, their assignments, their reports as well. And so it's something that will evolve over the next few weeks. Hopefully, we'll have the first public sharing of the material in about a month's time, if not earlier. So here's the Gugu Yalanji dictionary that Uncle Bennett shared with me. I want you to look at, we can talk about the cover itself, which is very racialized in so many ways. And there's so much wrong with that image. But let's focus on the language. And so you see, this is the description page about the grammar. And then let's just look at the first line. The Gugu Yalanji alphabet has 16 letters. Now, when I read that with Uncle Bennett, I said, let's just stop here. This is fundamentally problematic because language is sound. It is not alphabets. Alphabets are written version, it's a writing system, and letters are what we use in writing. That is not what language is. Language is spoken. And until the time of colonization and occupation of Australia, the indigenous languages, people did not write them. So there was no writing systems, there were no alphabets, there were no letters, but the language existed, which was sound. So this is just another example of one of the reasons why I moved away from doing linguistics, because of the fundamental problems in how it's conceptualized. It's speciesist, it excludes people, it has huge racist sort of agendas that are hidden behind it. Again, today is not the time to talk about it, but this is part of the reason I don't do linguistics or even traditional applied linguistics anymore. And I focus on creating credible projects and subaltern practice. And that's what I'll be sharing with you today. So from there, I tell him what I do, and we talked about this book that I had worked with my student called The Ribbit Pond. The book is now in 35 languages. I've included the web link here, and I'll send it through the chat later on. And notice there is a Bangla version as well. So you guys in Bangladesh, when you go to this website, you can find the Bangla, and then you can find all these other languages. There are 35 languages. And they appear side by side in the book. So it's an on-demand, multilingual, translingual resource with very nice message. So that was one of the things I showed to him. And then he said, oh, let me show you the book I've been working on. So this is the picture that you guys saw earlier on, which is Uncle Bennett sharing Jinkalmu with me. And notice how it comes from the land. It's connected to the native people and where they live. Again, I won't go through the story, but that's where we started talking about the Frog River. And, we started saying, all right, let's do a project together. Now, notice Jinkalmu and the dictionary and other projects that Uncle Bennett has been involved in. And he's not an academic by any means. He's a community elder. But you can see these projects are very relevant to the needs of the community. So when their language is being lost and they don't have resources to maintain and create interest in the language, instead of complaining or instead of carrying out surveys and being upset, what their community did was they worked together to create a resource that could be used to achieve the goals that they had, to help, so this book is, for example, is used in the Mossman area public schools, especially within the indigenous communities. So this is what I would call an example of a credible project. Again, I've talked about what a credible project is in many, many places. So I won't spend too much time talking through this. It's essentially an acronym, which when you put it together, it means it's credible. And for me, credibility comes first. I don't care as much about reliability or validity or data or a study, unless it has credibility. Because if it doesn't have credibility, the rest of this stuff is not very relevant or important. So credible first, and then everything else. So the credible projects are essentially ways in which we can work together in our communities with our collaborators to create the resources, to create the material, to create the economies, to create the strategies, to achieve the goals that we have for our own people and our own communities. So it's best done by the people who are based in an area for the people who live there. So it's thinking locally all the time. So the way we do this is we go through multiple stages. First, of course, is the conceptualization stage, which is with the Frog River, it would be initial conversation with Uncle Bennett, but then we sort of taking it further and bringing it to the school, connecting it, turning it into part of the assignment and teaching goals of my semester. Sort of developing it, and the collaborators for this project have evolved and emerged, and we are still getting more collaborators to help us and work with us and extend the project in interesting ways. So today I will share the artwork and the music, but other things can also come out of it at a later point in time, and we will work on that as time goes on. Then we have the data analysis. Now, the data for our credible projects is not the traditional data where you collect interviews or things and you analyze the interviews. No, our data analysis is essentially anything. Conversations with people, conversations with your parents, with your children, reading the academic literature, reading newspapers, reading magazines, everything really that you can get your hands on and be engaged in to sort of help you with planning the project. So what we are doing is we are not doing a review per se, we are doing an analysis, and the analysis is for the planning of our project. And at the same time, we do positive discourse analysis, which is looking at good examples, model examples of things that work really well, and then analyzing them to see what we can learn from them and how we can use that to develop our own material. Then, that essentially moves us into the material design. So from the analysis, we move to the design. So how can we use our literature analysis, our PDA, our consultations into designing the material. And of course, we take the material back to the community and the collaborators and consult with them and keep editing it, keep revising it. So again, a lot of the material, other than the poem itself, The Frog River, is not finalized yet. So we're still working on it and developing things. It's still in the consultation and revision stage. And then, of course, once it's all done, it's going to be implemented, documented, sharing. I mean, today I'm sharing parts of it already. And then, of course, we'll update it, extend it, and continue the work. Right. So in doing this work, as I said, data analysis, we look at how do we use the literature from any source to create the material we need to. Now, in today's session, I will not actually share the literature analysis or the PDA because we have a pretty short time. And I would rather focus the time on the actual material and what we created and looking at the resonance between the different modalities of our presentation and look more at how we do this rather than the literature that we used. That can be done another time. So moving on, let's so in terms of the development of the project and the background, so, we took all these things, we knew where we were coming from, we knew what we were going to do as a credible project. So very first week, this is a screenshot from my Canvas site where I asked the students, gave them homework after week 1's lecture, we had already talked about creating resources as the goal for the semester. And then I gave them a resource to linking them to the chapter 2, or actually lesson 2 of Ivan's dissertation, and telling them to read that and start thinking around what kind of a storyline we should have for the Frog River. I also gave them a broad storyline based on this is not exactly what Uncle Bennett said, but it's how I sort of redesigned the idea for my students to take and then work on it further. So essentially with the Frog River, our key message was that we want readers to understand that when we fight and we argue, we cause harm to ourselves and others. When we cooperate and work together, we make things better and help others too. And I think this is a very timely message. If we just look around the conflicts around the world today, we know there's so many conflicts and things where we are fighting and causing harm, and we are arguing and causing harm, rather than collaboratively working together to make this world a better place. So this Frog River comes at a time in time in history as well, to sort of create a response to our subaltern response to the conflicts around the world. And as a subaltern, as a credible, performer of subaltern practice, what we're doing is creating a resource to achieve the goals. And we actually have quite a few goals here. So as I said, I asked my students to start by reading Ivan's dissertation. It's called The Making of the Ribbit Pond. Notice today's talk is called The Frog River in the Making, because we haven't yet made it. It's still happening. And Ivan's dissertation was based on his development of the book, The Ribbit Pond, which I shared with you earlier. And notice if you look at his table of contents for his dissertation, he doesn't have chapters. So this is a dissertation with no chapters. Instead, it has units and it has lessons. So it's written as a resource for other people. So if you read Ivan's dissertation, which you can download from academia, you can actually use this to create your own picture books like we did with the Frog River and the Ribbit Pond and other things. So the whole dissertation is written as a resource for others to use to create their own work. So in that sense, the dissertation itself is an example of a credible writing. So it's not written in traditional research. So the students took all of this stuff, and then you can see there are 40 replies even the first week. And then we kept working on it, and we kept working on the drafts. We worked through several drafts, actually. I can't even tell you how many we went through before we came to the final draft, which sort of I led to create. So from the initial conception to the final draft, which we haven't really changed much since then, it took about 5 weeks. Why? Because you will see there's a lot of thinking about language that goes into this river, the book. And let me read this book to you again. Now you can see there is a speakers right on the side. There are speakers because there is actually a soundtrack that goes with this recording of this, with this presentation. Unfortunately, the sound recording is not, I cannot play it through the computer here for you guys. So I have shared a link to a Dropbox file so you guys can listen to the music on your own devices as we go back and read the story. Okay, let's go back. So, the Frog River. By Frog River, swift and wide, two frogs, Jack and Mark, reside. Jack was bold and full of pride. Mark was cautious, never lied. Can you see the frogs here? The two frogs? I'll let you keep looking. One bright morning, in the sun's warm glow, a red kangaroo hopped to and fro. Is it safe to cross? He asked with cheer. Jack said, yes, dive right in. Have no fear. But Mark shook his head, his voice full of dread. The current is too strong. You will be swept. Not heeding the warning, proud Kanga leapt, only to find that his legs were inept. Later that day, a small possum drew near. Is it safe to cross the river, I fear? Mark said, it's too risky. Please stay away. But Jack said, with a beam, you'll be okay. With hope in her heart, Posy took a leap. But soon she was caught in waters so deep. Before they could blink, they saw her being swept, and the brothers knew that it was their misstep. Then a platypus, looking angry, did rise. What's causing these tragedies? Open your eyes. Mark confessed, we argue, we fight on who can cross and who just might. Enough, cried the platypus. End this fight. You are brothers. Your bond needs to be tight. Work together with wisdom, with foresight, or more will be lost to the river's might. As evening fell, an old wombat strolled by. Is it safe to cross? I'm eager to try. Now Jack and Mark knew they had to be wise. So joining their strengths, a plan they devised. Jack led the way, Mark swam on the side, guiding Wombi through the rising tide. Together they swam steady and true, and safely old Wombi made it through. Through mistakes and lessons, the brothers at last learned unity is a strength with power so vast. With teamwork and love, together and steadfast, there's no river too wide, no current too fast. So let's look at the language of this poem, of this narrative poem. Of course, it's a narrative genre. And we'll look at a few different things. There's a lot we can do. I'll limit it very briefly to looking at the genre. So you can see that the story starts off with an orientation. It's got complication number 1, which is Kanga's attempt. Then we have a complication 2, which is Posy's dilemma. Then we have complication number 3, which is Platy's scolding, Platy's scolding, which then leads towards the resolution, right? And the resolution is where we see Wombi's crossing. And then at the end, we have a coda, right? So we can see that the poem is actually written as a narrative, as a story. And that's why you can see the artwork is connecting it to it as a story, its movement. And as I said, not all the artwork is yet done. It's still very much in the making. We can also see the transitivity system, which is a grammatical system. In traditional grammar, people talk about verbs. In SFL, we use transitivity as a way of creating experience. So we can see how different types of transitivity system was used to create different kinds of processes. So here, all the material clauses are read. And these give you a really material sense of movement, of actuality. That's why the story has a lot of action and movement. It's because we use a lot of material clauses. And this is all on design. This is why it took us about 4 or 5 weeks to work through and modify all this poem to, from the structure to the choice of verbs to the choice of adjectives, everything. So, it's not just rhyming and rhythm, but creating a poem requires an understanding of how language will essentially work to help with the meanings that we want to be created. Right, so you can see all the relational clauses are yellow. And notice there's a lot more relational clauses in just the beginning part, especially the first orientation, because we are setting the scene. But after that, we don't have many relational clauses unless we look at what other people are saying. So for example, what the platypus says. But I've not included that in the analysis here because I want to show how the movement of the poem is. You can also see there's a lot of verbal clauses which are essentially giving an extension or asking somebody else's voice to come inside of a text. So it creates a diglossic text where we've got multiple participants engaging and constructing the texts. And that's done through all these verbal clauses. And you will then notice also that there's quite a bit of mental stuff going on with things in the mind. So they only to find that it's like, so he realized that they saw her being swept. So they realized there was an activity, it's a perception. Jack and Mark knew they had to be wise. So it's a mental clause again, and that learned unity is a strength. So you can see how at key points we use mental clauses to create a sense of reflection. And that is also carried over into the poetry, into the artwork and the music, as we are going to see later on. So we will see how actually transitivity and the genre work together with how the art happens and the music happens. And then there's only one existential clause at the very last night. There's no river too wide, no current too fast. That sort of opens up this space. So you can see how the choice of grammar, and I'm only talking about the transitivity system. We can talk about, for example, we can talk about the mood. So for example, who gets the interrogatives, who gets the exclamations. So we create who's got the declaratives, all these different choices of the grammar that are used to construct this poem and this narrative, right? And then we, of course, can see the rhyme structure and the rhythm, and we'll come again, it's very relevant to the music part of it as well. But you can see how, for example, the rhyming structure, you see that the whole stanzas are rhymed in orientation in the first set of complication, and then platypus coming out and giving the sort of scolding the frogs, and then in the coda. And all the other parts, you will see the rhyming is the first 2 lines and the third and the fourth line. So the same repetitive way of rhyming things. And that's part of how we sort of created the tempo and the rhythm. You will also see that this number of syllables changes. So the orientation is a 7-7-7-7. The complication, the initial part of the complication, which is also kind of like the background, is 9 because we're still setting up the scenarios. Then we come into the main action, we get 10, 10, 10, 10, until we come to the point where there's a realization happening. And we see that the frogs have realized that they're making a mistake. And then it goes to 11. And then the platypus comes out, which is 11, 11. And then Mark's confession shrinks down to 8 because Mark is feeling guilty now. So there's not a lot of talk, there's a confession, and it's a short confession. And notice that after that, we come back to the sequence of 10s. And then the last one, which is getting back into ending the resolution, we get back to 9. And then the coda has whole different structure again. It's our 11, 11, 11, 11, because it's us reflecting on the whole episode of the whole poem itself. So you can see how in writing this poem, we use the rhyme and the rhythm to create particular meanings. We use the language to create characters. We use language to create this scene and things, which essentially helps quite a lot when we talk about it in terms of how we convert it into art, and then how we do it in terms of music as well. So for art, essentially, Anne has been working on it, and she presented her draft work to the students a couple of weeks ago to get feedback. And I'll be sharing her presentation and her work in the next segment. So in terms of creating the artworks, she used the language pattern. Of course, there's the orientation. Notice that she's highlighted for us in the blue, that's the first complication, which is the kangaroo complication. And she looks through and analyzes the poem to look at different elements. So there's a time, there's an animal coming, Jack and Mark say something different, and then the animal attempts to cross, and the result of the crossing. That's essentially with the same structure that happens every time. So she then used that to break down the poem. So of course, there's the bright morning first setting up, then the animals coming, Mark and Jay say things differently, animals attempt, and then the result is either good or bad. So you can see then how in the scene 3, there's the sunset, there's a reflection, the platypus comes, there's a reflection, and the colors change. And as the evening falls, things have changed. It's no longer the same. So you can see how she used the language and the genre structure. So our development of the orientation, the complications, resolution, and coda to create the artwork for it. She used different color patterns to create different sort of impressions and feelings. So bright morning is warm, it's a bright glow of the river. There's a brighter, vivid. So in the midday, there's more danger is happening. So their colors change to give a sense of danger. Then in the evening, there's more reflection and the colors change again. They're dim, intense colors of nature, long reflections on the river. And the evening, things are peaceful, calm, and harmonious. So she uses the color and the descriptions of color and scenes in the poem and translates them into designing the artwork. This is all watercolor, by the way. So this is part of an early draft again, is the kangaroo coming. This is, you will notice, is not what we saw in the version of the book I read to you earlier, because these are drafts that I'm sharing with you. So you can see how kangaroo is coming in and this bright morning. You can see the personality of the frogs through her artwork as well. So she looks at communication and collaboration. So she's looking at how to use posture and positioning, how to use body language to create certain impressions of emotions that we can recognize. You can see it all working together. Now, of course, in addition, she also had a chance to look at the images, had a chance to spend time with the people in the area, have a look at the region, look at the different parts of Australia and how some of the habitats where the frogs would live of different kind, how the seas work, how the rivers work. So, and then looking at the animals, spending time in nature, and of course, doing the study and doing the positive discourse analysis and bringing it all together to create the initial drafts. And these are the initial ideas that she had, which then have been redone in relation to what we see in the material. So then we have music. And again, I'm sorry about not being able to share sound live with you. I wanted to have the music in the background the whole time for today's session, but that's unfortunately not working. So on music, we have got Hayden and Mary, who are my friends, who are musicians and actors, and they've been working on this. Again, this is very much in progress, in the making. And they came in last Thursday, actually, at around this time last Thursday. They came in to share some of the draft ideas with my students. And then we've been discussing the music, and they've been editing it and changing it and refining it. And they're still work in progress. So they also have to look at things in a very similar way. So for them, because they're musicians, the first thing that comes in is they have to reading and working out a rhythm that honors the text. So how do the beats match with the text? How do they use the language and the music to create a natural flow and work together in a way to make the song for this section? So you can see they're marking stress patterns on the drafts. So they've written down the text, and they're working through the text to figure out where the intonation will be, what the rhythm would be, where the beats would be, what the natural sort of stress pattern for the language is in this context. So bringing that all together, so analyzing again the language, but this time from a perspective of music, so from rhythm and rhyming and melody and tempo, and bringing all those things together. So and they of course looked at color atmosphere themes, which keys and chords will work best for the kind of meanings that they want to project. So they've realized that A flat, B flat, and A flat works well, and then they've added some melody lines. So then they also worked to again with thinking around how do they structure that. So notice this A B C C C is their way of doing a register analysis or a genre analysis. So they didn't break it up in the way that I did, where I had the orientation, and then I had the complication, and then I had a complication. So that was from a language perspective. So what they have been doing is looking at the same thing from a music perspective. And so from a music perspective, they realized that the first two stanzas actually worked well together because they come as a pattern because it's setting up the scene. And then something happens. So, and then there's a new scene being created, and then something happens. So the way that they parsed the whole sequence is quite different. So notice it's when Posy leaps, and then the kangaroos realize, the frogs realize that it was their misstep. That's a C, and then the C and the C, where it's all the resolution stage where they are working through this complex problem. And then they come back and notice instead of AB, now the structure is BA. So which means again, it changes, it reverses. So it's not longer AB, but it's AB, C, and then BA, and then the coda. And you can see how then they work the music to create a meaning that will connect with the language and the art. And yet it will be different because music operates differently. And now it's very important for us to realize here that music and oral language are actually use the same modalities, the same sensory systems. So it uses ears and mouth, and of course making instruments music is different. But you can see how they all operate through the oral or the sound sensory system of sound. So in that way, music and language work much more closely actually than words and the writing of the words through writing systems, which we will talk about again at some point. So that all comes together, and they've been composing the music. Of course, this is how they write the music, which is a musical language. So you can again see, just like in the context of language, we have Boli or speech, which can then be written down through use of different symbolic systems. We can also have music, which is like Boli. It's an auditory system, which can also then be written down on paper using different sets of different sets. So in terms of what's next and challenges, they're struggling, which is very similar to the struggles we were having when we were writing the poem, when we were working on the art, and now when we are working on the workbooks. The students that are working or developing the workbooks, they have exactly the same challenges. So making a song or the text or the work cohesive as a whole, balancing between creating interest and maintaining simplicity, very, very important, again, in language, in art, in music, and in the workbooks. Also, in this case, they're thinking about the musical rhythm versus the poetic rhythm, which we can sort of see in terms of how they've organized the musical patterns. So A, B, C, C, B, A, and coda. versus the poetic rhythm, which is more about the meanings of the poem, which is the orientation, complication, resolution, right? And then coda. So you can see they're also looking at the meanings and how you parse those meanings and how the structure, the variations and how you parse it impacts the realization and the creation of the work. And they're also thinking around characterization of rhythmically spoken during characters. So they're thinking about when they do the sound recording of the song, which they actually have done. Let me share with you a second file, audio file, because audio files I am unable to play here. So I will send you another link to a different song. This is actually the song draft. So the earlier,
It's working now, sir. We can hear the sound.
okay, good. You can hear the sound from my play?
Yes.
Really? Okay, let me try. Let me just try then in that case. Can you hear the song?
Yes. I
Okay.
can.
Okay, perfect. In that case, I will stop the song here. I'll play the song from here. Can you hear it now? Can you hear the song?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
yes, we can. Perfect.
Was cautious, never lied. One bright morning, in the sun's warm glow, a red kangaroo hopped to and fro. Is it safe to cross? He asked with cheer. Jack said yes, dive right in. Have no fear. But no, shake his head, his voice full of dread. If current is too strong, you will be swept. Not hidden only the proud kangaroo, only to find that his legs were in hurt. Later that day, a small possum drew near. Is it safe to cross the river? I fear. Mark said it's too risky, please stay away. But Jack said with a gleam, you'll be okay. With holding a high, Marcy took a leap, but soon she was caught in water so deep. Before they could blink, they saw her being swept, and the brothers knew that it was their misstep.
Okay, you can hear them having fun doing this work. It's always fun to do this kind of work. That's the other thing about credible projects is they're fun to do. Okay, let me just keep moving on. So moving on to the workbooks. Now, here we have 3 workbooks in the making, and the students just presented their drafts last Thursday. I sent them feedback, my TA sent them feedback, and they just sent us the updated versions this morning, this afternoon at 1 o'clock actually, so that they can get more feedback. So my job today and tomorrow is actually to give them more feedback, and then we will work from there. So I will share these with you, but before I do, I wanted to let you know, the first thing we had to do, of course, is to translate these poems into Cantonese and to Potongua, which is most people know as Chinese or Mandarin. Again, we did the same thing. They had the conceptualization work, the data analysis, the material design, which is where we are, and then there will be action and continuity. And in this case, they did a lot of literature analysis. I'm not going to spend time on it. And they did it multilingually. So they didn't just look at resources published in English. They looked at material published in Chinese and other languages that they spoke, including Japanese and Korean. So, and it was interdisciplinary. So they looked at stuff on language, linguistics, material design, education, pedagogy, multimodality, translanguaging, environmental issues, sociological issues, indigenous issues, PDA, all the stuff. And this is just a list. There's a lot more that they did in terms of literature analysis. And then in terms of PDA, they looked at a lot of teaching learning material of different kinds, designed for children, designed for adults, designed for teaching language, designed for teaching skills, other practices, learning to see how people design this material. And of course, looking at academic sources as well. And that all comes together into the creation of the drafts. So these are very much in the making. And there is a recording, actually there's a recording of Cantonese as well. And so you can hear the recording. This is the Potonghua version.
清晨阳光暖洋洋，红袋鼠跳到河旁，他笑着问：“我想过河，这安全吗？”杰克回答：“当然可以，勇敢跳吧。” 但马克摇摇头，声音都在发抖。
So as we listen to the Mandarin version, you can have a quick look at the kind of work they're doing. Again, we won't have time to go through it in detail today. I just want you to have a look. So they start off by, of course, giving a bit of an orientation on what this book is, who's supposed to use it. Eventually, they will have the QR codes inserted for the readings and things. It includes notes for teachers and students, pronunciation guide for Pinyin, the story itself, the translations, and then lots of activities and answers. So they're all working together. You can see about 10 students worked together to create it. They've worked in different teams, and all the teams came together to create it. And for them, they set it up after the introduction and notes. They've gone stanza by stanza. So that's just the pronunciation guide. So it goes in for each of the texts. I'm pausing here just for you to listen to the recording. Notice the voice changes. So in their recording, they've actually created a performance, which means so every time there's a new character coming in, the voice changes. So they're also taking multimodality and intonation and voice and characterization into account in creating it, just like we did in the creation of the poem itself and the artwork and the music. So book goes in, creates tons of activities for writing, tracing, vocabulary. This is still, of course, a draft version, but you can see already there's lots of work. Tons of activities, and the activities then repeat themselves for each stanza. But of course, as each stanza goes, we go through the next stanza, we have more vocabulary, we have more grammar, so everything builds up, everything gets more complex, right? So you've got some of the QR codes already in there that can be scanned to link to recordings. There's grammar, there's everything. So it's a comprehensive textbook, and you can see it's almost 114 pages, and this is still a draft version. So a lot happening here. We've got a Cantonese version. Again, the introduction lays out what it is. And then you can see, again, how they've used the layout. So you've got the Cantonese writing system up, that you have the Jutping, which is the pinyin for Cantonese, with the tone markers of how to say it if you don't recognize the characters. And then by word meanings of what these words mean, what these sounds mean in English, and then a translation of the original one, the original line from English. And they do it for each line. So this already is starting to help the learners learn the vocabulary, learn to understand the sounds. And then they've got a lot of listening activities where they make people listen to specific sections. Again, there's connected to YouTube recordings of it. So notice that's all 000 right now. That's because they're still working on the recordings. And so there are different things that they want them to stress, listen to the stress, listen again, then try to say these sentences yourself. Now that we have taught you, we have made you listen to specific things, it's your turn. And we still give them all the repeated aids so that they can keep seeing the vocabulary items being repeated, so that can help them with their language learning. So you can see how instead of doing a paper on SLA, we've actually integrated our understanding of language learning and language development into the development of the material. So that's what credible approach is all about. So we see that's how they are doing it for the Cantonese. And again, tons of activities for lots of activities, often with instructions, deconstruction, joint construction, independent construction. So we're using the Sydney School genre approach to creating the resource. So how do we take the theoretical ideas and turn them into material design? And we see that similar things happening with learning English with the Frog River. And you can notice there's a Chinese there because they're designing this resource with a Chinese student audience in mind. So it's not for all people, it's for Chinese people who speak Chinese already, who want to learn English. And again, you will see there's a lot more Chinese in this text. And then slowly it will transition in from Chinese to English. What's happening here with this? My Acrobat is acting up. Yeah. So you can see how there's a lot of translanguaging happening. So you can see how translanguaging research is then translated into material development and material design. Again, the complexity of these books and resources will increase as you go through the booklet. You can see how we're also starting to work to develop an alignment between the images and the resource. So this is something that still has to be done. We're just starting to work on it because the art is also taking time to develop. So you again have the same structure. You go by either each stanza or by the section, the narrative structure, to sort of create different sets of activities, listening, speaking, conversations, grammar, so this conversation. Notice how this is not the exact stuff from the poem, they actually change it. Jack, you said the river was safe to cross, right? Yes, I said it was safe, don't be afraid. But I asked Mark, and he suggested that I better not cross. Yes, it was dangerous because of the strong current. So what do you suggest I do? I suggest that you wait until it's safer to cross. Now, notice this is not the message of the poem, but they're taking the poem and extending it because the poem itself does not have a lot of conversation. So they take the material, they take the poem, they extend it, and then convert it into reading and acting. So this is now moving into a performance, into role plays. So then you can extend the activities into role play activities if you were using this resource as a classroom resource. So lots going on, as you can imagine. You can see still a lot of work done and a lot of work in progress. Things are still moving, and hopefully in a couple of weeks' time, you will start to see outcomes of this work that I share on social media and other places, and of course through the FLC website. Yeah, so that's all from me. I'm happy to take on questions, discuss things, and pause.
Yes, thank you so much, sir, for your, what should I say, that enchanting speech, I should say, So now is the time for question answer. So may I request all the participants, those who are here, if you have any questions, query, or observation, you are open to share now. Anamika ma'am, I hope you are here. So any questions from anyone?
Sir, I have a question. How did you come up with the idea of writing the poem, The River? I mean, what was your inspiration?
I think I mentioned that in the beginning. It came out of a conversation with Uncle Bennett. I'll share the slide again so you can have a look. Yeah, so this is Uncle Bennett and me having a conversation about issues in the community. So this poem and this work is very much a tribute to the Indigenous and the Aboriginal people of Australia, because they are the unceded custodians of these lands, and the British are still the occupiers of this land. So Australia was never given an independence. In fact, they don't even have a treaty. So there's no treaty between the Australian government and the Indigenous peoples here. So essentially, it's an occupied land. And so, as happens in very often happens in occupied territories, I mean, we ourselves were occupied for a very long time in South Asia. One of the outcomes of occupation, sustained occupation, is that you have communities fragmented, people divided, people in conflict, and that's mostly engineered through occupation and colonization, through a number of things, including linguistics and anthropology, among other disciplines. So, we had a long conversation for hours around these things, and it was in the sharing when Uncle Bennett talked about this idea of a story that he wants to write at some point, where there are two frogs, and then you're driving by, and then you're not sure if you want to cross or not, and then you choose to cross, and then you get drained away, and you realize, and the frogs eventually realize they're giving conflicting advice, or they're fighting with each other. And because they're fighting with each other, things are lost. So that was his primary idea. And essentially, the idea is to create a resource through which we can teach children and adults as well that we need to not fight, but we need to figure out ways of collaborating and working together to achieve goals. Otherwise, our communities break down, our economies shatter, our cultural practices, every aspect of our life is impacted negatively because of those divisions. So we had these long conversations around how colonization and occupation leads to divisions and conflict. So just think about South Asia, one land divided into so many countries, one people divided into so many people. It happens through colonial processes, and a lot of that is embedded. That a lot of that divide and rule policy is actually actualized, is realized. It's through education and through various disciplines, because how else would you do divide and rule? But to create divide and rule, you have to embed the divide and rule within the very early childhood education that we receive, and that is continually reinforced through all of our schooling system, including the kind of research that we do. Right, so this is where I was talking about the Kuku-Yalanji dictionary and how useless it is, and how it is fundamentally flawed in the way that it uses letters to create an understanding of language. That's fundamentally flawed. So when the foundational understandings in a lot of these disciplines are flawed, and then they're applied in indigenous and colonized contexts, then that leads to consequences for the people in the communities. So for example, even today, Urdu and Hindi are mutually intelligible, and yet they are seen as two distinct languages. And one might wonder why, when we define language in the Western concept of language, we see it as mutually intelligible. So then when things are mutually intelligible, why call them two different things? In the case of Urdu and Hindi, it's because of the writing systems. And notice that's the right kind of writing system that we see here. And the writing systems are actually not inherent, are not actually part of language. They are representation of meanings or sounds. And we can see that because everybody around the world has Boli. If you are a normal human being, an average human being, then you will grow up and you will develop Boli, which is a speech in your language of your region, automatically. Nobody needs to say anything. One day you will start making sounds and words, and then you will start speaking. That's because language is a natural biological part of humans, as it is for a lot of species, right? So we know birds have sounds, then they use other sensory systems. Animals have of all kinds have language, and if they, in addition to verbal sounds, they also use other sensory systems, like we do. So all of these things come together in sort of the development of this project. and eventually in sort of creating the story. And because, of course, we are language experts, we think about how to use language to create particular impressions and how to create sequences of events, how to use language to make people reflect, and at the same time, having a rhythm and having a way of doing it with fun. Sorry, that's a long question, long answer to your question.
Yes, Mr. Litton, you may go ahead with your questions. Mr. Litton, are you here and can you hear us?
Yes,
If you have any questions, you may.
Yes,
I'm
sir, I'm here.
So what is your question, Litton?
My question to you is, sir, while explaining the poem which has been written by this sir, he literally discussed a lot of things. And we could understand one thing very clearly, that he had to go through a tremendous amount of journey while composing this one meaningful poem. Now, I know a person, and I am not going to mention his name, and he is literally doing everything to publish a book in the upcoming Omar Ekushe Boibela, which usually takes place in February. Now, while talking to him, I understood one thing, that he is literally getting everything ready-made. He is going to publish some poems about patriotism, about the liberation history of our country, about the impacts of colonialism. And the moment when he is, giving a kind of instruction to ChatGPT or artificial intelligence that write a poem for me regarding this or regarding that, he is instantly getting the poem as a ready-made poem. So my question to sir is, the way, ChatGPT is literally making everything incredibly easy for us, incredibly easy for, everyone. Will people still fall in love with the literary works in the upcoming days? Will people still spend as many hours as him in order to compose a poem or in order to write a literary piece? I know my question is a little bit out of the box. I am sorry, but since I have been watching him for quite a long time, that he is using ChatGPT to get his thing done. So I am a little bit concerned about the passion that people might lose in the upcoming days. What is going to happen to us if ChatGPT literally does all the things related to literary works? Thank you.
That's a good question. I think you can answer it just as well as I can, because what the future holds, nobody knows. But for sure, technology is developing, and the version of ChatGPT that you and I have access to, that's just the public facing versions. I'm sure there are much more sophisticated and much more developed versions of the technology that is used in other places. So how that's going to impact is a very big question. It's a complex question. It is a question that I do often raise with my students, usually in the first or second week of the semester. And often I ask them, we just have a discussion, and usually the outcome of this conversation is something like, well, the technology is here and it's going to keep on developing. So we might as well learn to use it and to learn to use it well. But as students and educators today, what we need to be thinking around is not necessarily not just being dependent on it, but thinking around what can we offer which AI cannot. So what is it that my students can do after they graduate, which will make them needed in the community and the workplace? So obviously, if my students only graduate with the kind of skills that AI can already do, then there is not much space for them. What can they do? The ChatGPT can do it already. But if they graduate with the skills and abilities that are not necessarily something that technology can replace, then there's something that they have. So in a thing, we have to think of value added. What value will my students graduate with? What will make them the top people to recruit in your workplace? And I would say that it's, yes, you can do things with ChatGPT if you already know what you're getting towards. But what students can do is with creativity, working across modalities to create things that are designed to achieve a certain goal. And that's something that, of course, you can use AI to help you. There is no reason why you should not. I actually actively tell my students to use resources to help them. But the decisions that you make are yours. You can't trust everything that AI does. It will make up references. It will tell you stuff that is untrue. But it can help. And if you want to, you should be able to use it to help you. But again, then think about what is it you're bringing as a value-added thing, which is something that AI cannot do by itself. Does it make sense?
So, yes, sir, it does. It does. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, now, thank you, sir, for your insightful words. We really, truly appreciate your time and valuable contribution today. And how can I finish this discussion without mentioning your beautiful recitation? It was really mesmerizing, and I wish we could hear more from you. I believe everyone else does feel the same way. It really touched our heart. Okay, so now, before we conclude, I would like to take a moment to thank each and every one of you for joining us today on Zoom. Thanks to our VC sir, thanks to Caroline ma'am, and also thanks to our faculty members and beloved students and all. Now, to formally conclude today's event, I would like to invite the head of the department, Mr. Pranav Kanti Deb, to deliver the vote of thanks. Thank you so much from my end.
So, thank you so much, Anamika ma'am. So, thank you, our today's speakers, Nearby Professor Ahmar Mahbub, so for his hard work and effort to make today's presentation a successful one. So I feel that this is not simply a presentation by a professor. I consider it is his strong commitment and passion for teaching learning. So teaching is something like this, actually. So thank you once again on behalf of the Department of English for considering your time, because I know that it's a very busy time that you are now leading, but I'm really grateful to you. So thank you, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Sir, Professor Dr. Ashraful Alam, sir. He is here with us from the very beginning, and I'm sure that he is enjoying, and through his words, he really encouraged us in these sessions. Thank you, all my colleagues and all the students of the Department of English for their passion. Professor Mahbub, today is the off day for our university. So yes, and it's a bit early morning in Bangladesh, you can see, but students still they develop a passion for your speech, and they are here to listen to you. Special thanks to the participants. We have some participants. I can see those who have joined with us from different parts of Bangladesh, even out of Bangladesh. So those who have joined with us, thanks to you all. That's how the Department of English Sylhet International University would like to move forward. We consider that, yes, university is not simply means that some classrooms and labs. University means something like universal knowledge. So that's how we would like to move ahead with learning and sharing together. So thank you very much once again for your time and patience. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.